Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Ben Baker. Ben is the president of Your Brand Marketing, an internal communications consultancy focusing on developing leaders, engaging, retaining, and growing employees, and developing champions for your company's brand. Ben is also the author of Powerful Personal Brands, a hands-on guide to understanding yours. Ben, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Howard, it is great being on the show with you. We always have a lot of fun off air, so we had to do it on air.
We do. And it's like a couple times a year, I need to reach out to Ben and see what he's up to. You reach out to me, see what I'm up to. And we have as much fun off the air. So yeah, you're right. We're going to have some fun on the air. And
absolutely.
So you are in beautiful British Columbia.
True.
How's the snow condition out there?
You know what? It's finally dissipated. We got hit. You know, Vancouver that never gets snow. If we get one snowfall a year, that's it. And it shuts down the city because everybody's sitting there on their summer rims. You know, nobody's got winter tires. Nobody's ready for it. The city doesn't have enough equipment for it. So if we get 6 or 8 inches of snow, this city goes into panic mode. I love having a 4-wheel drive because that way I can sit there going, okay, I got the all-wheel tires on. I got the 4-wheel drive. Yeah, I'll go a little bit slower. I'll give people a little bit more room, but at least I can get from A to B. But the snow's gone. The rain's come. We're into our regular winter.
That's fantastic. You know, here in Chicago, when there's any inkling of snow, there's a run on water and there's a run on chicken soup and frozen pizzas and things like that. And you know,
everybody goes into hibernation mode, do they?
Yes, they do. And it's like, I'm thinking, I have got to move someplace warm. I really do. Well, listen, what have you been up to? I mean, you are in the brand marketing space. I mean, you are all over LinkedIn. I see you a lot. You're on Facebook. You've got your radio show, Living Brand Live show. And so you've been pretty busy, but kind of give us a little flavor of who you are and what you've been up to, Ben.
I've been in the communications game for about 25 years. You know, I started off killing a lot of trees about 25 years ago. I started off in direct mail. So I was the guy that created those 500,000, million-piece runs, you know, of these catalogs that ended up showing up in your mailbox on a regular basis. So, you know, if you were getting, you know, a lot of direct mail in the 80s and 90s, you know what? It was probably my fault. From there, we really decided to go into taking a look and say, okay, how do we get people to open up mail better? And we got into promotional marketing because we found that if you put a pen or you put something into the actual envelope itself with the direct mail, you have the bumpy mail syndrome. And people sit there and they say, well, what is this? You know, what is this? You know, what's inside the envelope? So your open rates will go up. So over the years, we've done direct mail, we've done promotional marketing, we've done guerrilla marketing, we've done all sorts of trade show development, etc. But what I realized over and over again was when you ask a question, who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? Who do you do it for? What's the value? What makes you different? You get these blank stares in the headlights. From marketers and non-marketers alike, they don't know how to tell their story. They don't know their brand. And it really forced me back into the fact where I said, okay, I can be tactical the rest of my life. But until I can tell the brand story, until I understand what these people's brands are, I can't tell their story effectively and I can't tell it to the right people. So we moved in to really get into branding. And that was probably about 10 or 12, 13 years ago. We really got into branding, worked for some fairly large corporations and did some fairly significant brands. And we started looking at things and go, okay, we're telling the story externally, but who's telling the story internally? And this is going back about 5 years ago. About 5 years ago, we sit there and say, okay, do your people understand your brand? Do your people understand what your mission, vision, and values truly are? Are you living them as a company? Can they tell your story for you? And are they advocates for your brand? Are they building champions? And the answer more than likely was no. And that's where we've ended up. We've ended up in the internal communication because until your people inside are engaged, you can retain them and they're going to grow with you. you can't build champions and advocates for your brand outside the company.
Ben, for the sake of, me and our listeners, the word brand gets thrown about very effortlessly. I use personal brand, professional brand. What should our listeners know? I mean, you're a book author. I'm a book author. I podcast with a lot of book authors. What would we tell them about branding? What is their brand? So what do we need to know about it?
My favorite definition of brand right now comes from Jeff Bezos. It's how people think about you and what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I'm paraphrasing. It's not the logo. It's not the colors. It's how do people perceive you and why are you valuable to them? That's what your brand really, truly is. And you influence your brand, how you communicate, how you act, how you engage with people. Your logo, as I said, is just an avatar. It's a reminder to people of who you are and what you do. But it's how people feel about you. When you're not there to defend yourself, when I ask somebody, tell me about Howard, and they give me their honest viewpoint of what they think you're all about and why they care about you, that's your brand. And that's why I wrote the book, Powerful Personal Brands.
Let's talk a little bit about the book. I mean, it's a pretty substantive book. It's not an airplane book you're going to read on the one-way flight and then finish it on the other coming home. Tell us a little bit about the book. What went into writing it, and how was it received?
Well, thankfully, it's been really well received. The book was written because 4 or 5 times a year, I go up to different universities and I participate in networking and interviewing drills with the 3rd, 4th level marketing students at a couple of universities. And what I realized is these are really smart kids. They have absolutely no idea how to articulate their true value to others. What makes them different? What makes them special? What makes you unique? What are they passionate about? And I started looking for how can I find something that can help these kids understand how to communicate their value better, how to understand, codify, and communicate their value. And I couldn't find anything. So I wrote this book. And what the book is it's stories from my life. It's lessons that I've learned. And at the end of every chapter, I ask a question and I give them 2 or 3 pages of blank space for them to write their own ideas down. And, the questions of what are you passionate about and why? Why are you passionate about it? Well, I like mathematics. I'm passionate about math. Well, why are you passionate about mathematics? Well, I like the symmetry of math. Why? Well, what is it about the symmetry of math you like? And it goes on and on and on. Somebody called it, I forget who it came up with, the 5 whys.
It sounds like Simon Sinek kind of
thing.
Would be,
if it's not a Simon Sinek, it would be like a Simon Sinek. I mean, there is the Simon Sinek start with why, but once you get into the 4 or 5 whys into any particular point, you're going to get down to the essence. Why do I do what I do? It's not enough to understand that you do something. It's what are the motivations that cause you to do what you do, because that's what your superpower is. And I want people to understand what their superpowers truly are. Because if you can say, I love teaching. I love teaching in a B2B environment with leaders, and I want them to be able to be better leaders and be able to inspire the people that they work with. Well, if you understand why you can do that, then you all of a sudden are going to get people that are going to rally behind that thought and want to work with you.
When you were back working with the students, now are you still going back to the universities and doing?
Oh, yeah.
What's coming out of those classes and these workshops and them learning about the why and going down deep into it? Does it resonate for them?
You know what? Some people it does, and some people it's very uncomfortable. Some people are very uncomfortable when you ask them why do they do what they do. And it doesn't matter if you're 18 years old or you're 65 years old. A lot of people cannot actually articulate why they do what they do. They say, well, I just do it. I just do it. And that's the end of the conversation. But the people that are actually willing to take the time and make the effort to understand why they do what they do are the people that are going to go further in life, because they can sit there and say, you know what? We do this because of this, and this is why it's important, and this is where we're going, and this is how you fit into this particular plan, and we can't do this without you. And that's how they inspire people. That's how people are inspired. And the more we can understand the why behind the what we do, the more we can bring other people along on the journey. The more engaged people are, the more passionate people are, the more bigger champions we're going to grow for brands, and the more successful the company is going to become, or the more successful you're going to be personally.
How's this work been informing your focus today, which is very much on developing leaders? I would imagine throughout the organization, it's just not the leader at the pinnacle of the organization, but leaders throughout, because we all have the capacity to lead.
Absolutely.
And so how is this work of understanding the why and this pursuit of their passion and their values, their establishing a quality culture, how is this work helping to make a difference in the types of companies that you work for?
Right. And you're right. Leadership is an attitude. It's not a title. Nobody has the title leader. Leadership is something that you aspire to be. And people follow a leader. They don't follow a manager, they follow a leader. In order for you to be a great leader, for you to be able to inspire people, for you to be able to communicate, for you to be able to be that person that people want to follow, you have to know yourself first. You have to love yourself first. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe in your abilities before you can lead others. Because you can't get the best out of other people until you can get the best out of yourself. I have a buddy of mine, Mike Melia, who used to, I'm trying to remember which major company it was either Staples or Office Depot, one of the big things in Vegas. And he used to own Nevada in terms of working with the big casinos and doing that. And he had a massive sales team that he used to work with. And he used to say he wouldn't hire anybody who didn't love themselves. If you couldn't tell him what made you, what made you different, what made you unique, he wouldn't hire you. Because if you didn't understand yourself, how are you ever going to be able to be interested in other people?
That's a really hard exercise for I want to use air quotes, the typical individual that gets promoted into a leadership role, because a lot of times they're very much into themselves. And I am what I am. But they cannot articulate what makes them unique and the value, and here's their why. So how do you pull that out of them to really open up and share the deep story, to be able to go deep, as opposed to the superficial story, which is, hey, I'm great.
A lot of it is conversations. I mean, I believe you're certified DISC. Sometimes we use Strength Finder, sometimes we use DISC, sometimes we use other platforms. But a lot of it comes down to getting people to fully understand who they are beyond articulating it. Being able to run through a series of tests that sit there and say, you know what? These are the things you're good at. These are the things that you're saying you're bad at. These are the things that you like to do. These are the things you don't like to do. These are the things you're passionate about. These are the things you could care less about. And it's a matter of getting people to understand it's okay to have deficiencies. It's okay not to be perfect at everything. In fact, there's going to be way more in life that you're bad at than you are good at. That's life. You never want me to do your taxes for you. You never want me to paint your house. Those are things that you just don't want me to do for you. But what you need to understand is, a great leader understands that they're not great at everything, but they surround themselves with people who make them better. And if you can get people away from that ego of I'm wonderful to my job is to help other people be better at what they do, then that's how leaders are grown and built and developed. The problem is, most leaders, as they grow within a company, are not given sufficient training, and they're not given mentorship. They're not given coaching. They're not given the development skills that they need. And then we run into the Peter principle, where people are promoted to their level of incompetency. You get a great salesman who is great at being with the customer, being out there, doing the things that they love to do. And because they're a great salesman, somebody makes them a sales manager. Well, what a horrible thing to do to this person. Because all of a sudden they're being forced into a completely different skill set that's not in their element. They're having to do paperwork. They're having to manage people. They're having to do a whole bunch of things they really don't want to do. You need to be able to sit there and say, what is the individual path of individual people? What do you aspire to do? What are the things you're good at? What are the things that are going to make you understand and live your superpower? And that's tough. It's not a 5-minute conversation. It's multiple 5-minute conversations every week and ongoing and ongoing and ongoing.
It reminds me of a conversation I had a few weeks back with Mark Terrell. In fact, we just published his podcast. He talked a lot about motivations.
Yeah.
You know, what motivates people? Because as a leader or an individual, we all have a variety of motivations, and we can measure that in any number of psychometric tools. And then we have our personality. So we can help ourselves and learn about ourselves as individuals, but then we also need to take that personality, those motivations, and how do I turn that into how I interact with my team members that I'm going to be leading, so I understand them, so that I can get the most out of them and learn from them and give them opportunity. So I think that, with the leadership, it involves a lot of measurements, but it involves a lot of coaching and really helping them discover what they're good at, what they're not good at, what do they need to develop, and what do they need to say, it would be nice to develop that, but it's not really worth that investment. I need to have somebody else on my team who's really good at it. So like you said, you're not an accountant, you're not the house painter, et cetera, the chef. Perhaps, maybe you are a
Definitely
chef.
not the chef.
Definitely not the chef. But we need to have those individuals. So part of my developing my leadership and understanding my motivations is also understanding how do I start to bring in other people into my organization that can provide the value that I personally can't bring or don't need to have to bring it. When you're working with your companies, your clients on leadership, what does your program look like? I mean, how are they coming to you, Ben, in terms of, do they call you up? Do they find you on social sites like LinkedIn? It's a word of mouth. But when they come to you and they say, we need help, what are they typically saying to you?
A lot of it comes down to, I deal with a couple of different type of companies, and they're all B2B. And they usually have 100 to 200 people minimum in terms of employees. They're either going through enormous growth or they're going through flux. Either they've been bought or sold, or the next generation is taking over, or something along those lines where there's big changes going in the company. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing. And one thing that you're going to see when a company is in flux and in turmoil is a lot of turnover. What I tell people is every employee that you lose costs you $100,000 to replace. And it's not just the hiring process. It's everything that goes along with it. It's the fact that everybody else in the office has to pick up the slack. It's the jobs that get missed. It's the customers that get mad and leave. It's the customers that leave because whoever walked out the door grabbed their Rolodex and took a half dozen clients with them. It's the mistakes that people make along the way as they're ramping up, when they're joining the company and onboarding and all that kind of thing. The mistakes that they make that cost the company money. It's the onboarding itself. It's the training and hiring that goes with it. It's a big process to replace somebody. And you get a lot of companies that spend an enormous amount of money backfilling instead of sitting there going, okay, strategically, who are the next people that we need to hire? They're in panic mode, going, okay, somebody else left. We need to get that person rehired ASAP. So that's where a lot of the stuff comes up with me. And that's where a lot of the people come to me, and why they come to me really comes down to sitting there saying, okay, we know there's an issue. We know we're having turnover. We know that there's communication issues. We know that there's some challenges within the company, but we really don't know why. We know that we have low engagement rate, where they've done an engagement survey of some type. and they don't know why. And my attitude is, I'm not your typical consultant. Your typical consultant comes in, says, well, you have an engagement issue. Bye. Here's my 50-page report, and here's my bill. See you later. My attitude is, okay, we've got an engagement issue. Here are some challenges and some things that might be causing it. Let's delve through this together. Okay, we finally figured it out. Let's fix it together. And my engagements tend to go that way. Is there tends to be some consulting with it. There tends to be some workshops and some onboarding stuff that goes with it. And then there's ongoing communication and ongoing meetings for sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's longer, to make sure that whatever teaching that we've done, any changes that we've made are reinforced. Because you can't be expected to go to a 2-day workshop or take a course or have somebody come in for a week and then have everything go perfectly. It just doesn't happen. Change happens slowly and change happens incrementally. And it's changing mindset as much as it is process. And that's why the ongoing stuff needs to happen.
How are you bringing the brand element into this leadership process?
To me, the brand is really important. Because a lot of the time you ask people to close their eyes and say, what's your mission, vision, and values of a company? And they go struggling for those wonderful 6 words or that pithy sentence that every company seems to have, but nobody really remembers it. And what we tend to do is we'll create a brand story instead. Where did you come from? What was the impetus of the company? Why did it start? Where are you today? And what got you from that impetus to today? Now that you're here, who do you serve? Why do you serve them? How do you serve them? Why do they find you valuable? And where are you going? If you can get everybody in the company to understand that story and be able to retell that story, it's got to be simple, it's got to be understandable, it's got to be retellable. Then you've got a chance of changing culture. If you can do that, you can change a culture and you can move a company forward and you can build leadership. Because if everybody understands the story, if everybody can retell the story and everybody believes in the story, then all of a sudden decisions start being made based on that story. You go into your weekly scrum with your team. The story is foremost. You have organizational change. The story is what is first and foremost when you're making that change and making those decisions. And when you're trying to tell people, it says, listen, we're going in a new direction. Does it jive with the brand story? Because if people sit there and say, okay, it jives with the brand story. Yeah, we're in. I understand how I fit into this brand story. I understand how what I do matters to this brand story. Yeah, I'm in. I've already bought into it. Let's go. And that's how things progress.
And you're working with companies, say minimum 100 employees, up to as many that fit within your business model.
Yeah.
How many of the company employees, the staff, are involved in this type of development? And I'm thinking about this, and the work gets done by the line employees.
Yes.
Okay? The leaders have the vision, managers have the checklist. This is what has to get done. And then the employees get it done, and they get measured on how well they did, and et cetera, et cetera. It would seem that this process that you're talking about really has to involve nearly everybody in the organization so that they are involved not so much the decision making, but in understanding this is the mission, vision, values. This is who we are today. This is who we want to be tomorrow. But they can all speak that language.
Exactly. I believe in when you're creating the new brand story, what you're going to do is you're going to do it as cross-team pollination. You need to have a team of people that you're working with, whether it's 10, 15, maybe 20 people, depending on the size of the organization, that are there to help. And you're going to have somebody from accounting, you're going to have somebody from finance, and somebody from ops, somebody from shipping, somebody from marketing, somebody from sales that are part of this team to be able to make sure that it resonates with everybody. But before you do that, what we do is we tend to go through the organization team by team by team and run them through either a half day or a full day of what do you think the company is today? And there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer. And we'll ask the same questions and we'll ask it to the executive team and we'll ask it to the guys in the shipping or the girls in the shipping department and everything in between. And what it is, they're closed doors things. I don't want to know anybody's name. I really don't, because people will say, well, who said that? I'm like, you know what? It was a team decision. It's not one particular person. 3 people in this or 5 people just had no idea what the mission and vision and values were. They couldn't tell you what they were and they didn't believe in them. Well, who are the people? You know what? It doesn't matter. The fact is that people didn't. And what we do is we'll sometimes bring in a graphic artist who does those visual storyboards, and we'll ask them the same question. And then we'll say, okay, we'll sit there and talk about culture for an hour. And then what we'll do is we'll take all the culture storyboards from the different groups and we'll put them up in one room. And we'll sit there going, okay, do they jive or are they completely different? And sometimes they are completely different. Different people in different departments think of the company completely differently. What is important to them is very different from another department. You know, how they view the culture, how they view the brand, how they view where the company is going could be completely different. And until you can get that congruency and understand where the deficiencies are and where the disconnects are, you can't build a brand story that's going to make any sense. And it's got to really bring everybody in, because if everybody doesn't buy into it, if everybody doesn't believe in it, especially at the senior levels, it's just going to revert to whatever it was before I walked in the door.
So true. Ben, in the time we have together, if you were going to leave one piece of advice for our listeners, and we can make an assumption, there's a couple business owners up there, managers, leaders in a variety of roles. They know they're struggling and they just don't know where to get started. What kind of piece of insight, and we would call it an insight to go. My co-host, Randy Ford, came up with that. And I think it's valid here. It's appropriate here. What would you leave the company that's struggling? They know something's wrong, but it hasn't occurred to them that they need to go out and get some help. Somebody like you, who could come out and help them. What would be that insight you would want to leave for them?
I think that the first thing that they need to do is stop sitting in the ivory tower and start talking to people and just have casual conversations and ask people, one-on-one, small groups, whatever. It says, how do you think about our brand? And whether it's your customers, your vendors, your employees, and I suggest asking everybody, what do you think that we do and what makes us different? What makes us unique? What makes us valuable? And start listing, are there congruencies or is there major disconnects? And if all of a sudden you're starting to hear major disconnects, that's where you know you have a big challenge. The story's not going to be exactly the same, but you want it from a high level point of view. Do people value you? Do people get what you do? And do they understand what they do within the company is meaningful? And if you can ask those kind of questions and you can start having those one-on-one conversations with people and sit there and say, what is your vision of this company moving forward? What do we do well? What don't we do well? And do it without judgment. Just sit and listen. And if you can do that as a leader, you're going to gain some real great insight, because it's amazing what happens. And you know what? If you have a customer experience team, if you have a phone tree, if you have people that are calling in on a daily basis, sit in on those calls. Take calls. Take calls from customers. Don't let people know that you're the CEO of the company. Just come in and just sit there for an hour and just listen to calls and listen to what the challenges are that your actual customers are having. Because if they're frustrated, probably that means that there's something inside your company that's frustrating them. And if it's frustrating your customers, it's probably frustrating your employees as well.
That's a wonderful insight, and thank you for that. Ben, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
I've made it really simple. I put everything out there at yourbrandmarketing.com. My speakers page is there. My online courses are there. My workshops there. My consulting's there. Even my podcast, the Your Living Brand.live podcast, everything is there at yourbrandmarketing.com. put it in one place where everybody can find it, and all my social media feeds are there as well.
Fantastic. So we will definitely provide the link back to yourbrandmarketing.com. Ben, it has been wonderful to play catch up with you, and I'm sure we'll do it again before the end of the year. And I know we're going to be in touch virtually via our LinkedIn and then some. And so I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us on the Success Insight podcast.
Howard, it's always a pleasure. We always have fun having these conversations. And you know what? Love having them with you.
Thank you so much. There you have it, folks. We have just been chatting with Ben Baker. He's the president of Your Brand Marketing. Ben works with organizations and their leadership and teams to become the best possible leaders and have engaged staff and really making the employee their most valuable asset. So do reach out to Ben at yourbrandmarketing.com. Learn more about his work, and do check out his Your Living Brand -live show. It's a wonderful podcast, and I think he's got a few hundred podcasts out there, and he's got some wonderful guests. Somewhere out there is his story about Seth Godin. We did not get to it on today's podcast. It's a wonderful story. I'm sure if you search hard enough, you will find it. And if you really need to, just send him an email and he'll point you right to it. So we were really appreciative of having Ben take out time from his busy day to come and chat with us on the Success Insight podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, let us know in the comments on successinsightpodcast.com, whether you find the episode via LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. My God, we're everywhere. But we definitely want to get your feedback about today's show and about our podcast in general. So as we say every show, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.